I've seen a ton of people go for the $150 plus budget plasma cutters that promise the world but end up leaving a half-cut piece of steel on the floor and a dented wallet. The regret comes from spending time on a tool that can't hold a steady arc, can't cut the thickness you need, or simply fries after a few jobs. So the question is whether the Miller Electric Spectrum 375 feels like a smarter buy or just another pricey promise. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When you're standing in a garage or a small shop, the first thing you worry about is whether the cutter will actually start up the first time you press the button. The Spectrum 375 is an inverter-based cutter, which means it draws power more efficiently than older transformer units. In practice, that translates into a lighter machine that doesn't sag on a workbench, and it can run off a standard 110V outlet without demanding a dedicated 240V circuit. For a hobbyist who only has a single-phase outlet, that alone removes a big barrier to entry. But the real test isn't just the plug, it's the metal you're actually cutting. I've watched several fabricators use a Spectrum 375 on inch mild steel, automotive sheet, and even thin stainless for decorative trim. The cutter maintains a clean edge without the ragged bite you sometimes get from cheaper units that struggle to keep the plasma stream focused. The arc stays stable even when you pause for a few seconds between cuts, which is a relief if you're tracing a pattern or making multiple identical parts. That stability is a direct result of the inverter's ability to regulate voltage on the fly, something you don't get from the low-cost, transformer-only models. Now, who should actually consider spending a few $100s on this Miller cutter? If you're a weekend warrior who occasionally needs to cut sheet metal for a car project, a backyard build, or custom art, the Spectrum 375 hits a sweet spot. It's portable enough to tote to a job site, yet powerful enough to tackle inch steel in a single pass. The Occupational Health and Safety label indicates Miller has taken the usual safety standards seriously. There's a built-in air cut filter and a grounded case that keeps stray current from zapping you or your workpiece. That peace of mind matters when you're not a full-time professional but still want to avoid nasty accidents. On the flip side, if you run a full-scale fabrication shop that needs to slice 1-inch plate continuously, you might find the 375 amp rating a little tight. Those larger shops often look for 500 amp or higher machines that can handle thick plate without stepping down the current. Also, if you rely on a CNC setup that demands a very specific control interface, the Spectrum 375's control panel is designed for manual operation, so you'd need an additional interface module that Miller sells separately. That extra cost and extra wiring could push the total investment beyond what a hobbyist expects. Let's talk about the practical strengths that show up once the cutter is in your hands. First, the torch is ergonomically shaped, which reduces fatigue when you're guiding it along a long seam. Because the machine is inverter-driven, it cools faster, so you can run longer cuts without waiting for it to chill down. That matters when you're finishing a custom exhaust pipe and don't want to stop every few minutes. Second, the air consumption is relatively modest. A standard shop compressor can keep up without having to be oversized, meaning you won't need to rent a big air tank just to make a few cuts. Third, the included consumables nozzle, electrode, and ground clamp are all sized for the 375 amp range, so you're not forced to hunt for third-party parts that may not match the cutter's pulse characteristics. Every tool has a downside, and the Spectrum 375 is no exception. The price tag, while lower than high-end industrial models, still sits above many entry-level cutters that hobbyists see on sale. That can feel like a gamble if you've never used a plasma cutter before. Also, because it's an inverter, the unit is more sensitive to voltage spikes. If your workshop's power isn't stabilized, you may need a surge protector or a small line conditioner. Finally, the machine doesn't have a built-in auto-set feature for material thickness. You have to dial in the correct amperage manually. That learning curve isn't brutal, but it does mean the first few cuts can be a little trial-and-error if you're new to the process. What does value look like beyond the headline specs? The real savings come from the reduced downtime and the ability to finish jobs in fewer passes. A cheap cutter that struggles with inch steel often forces you to make 2 or 3 passes, which doubles the consumable wear and adds hours to a project. With the Spectrum 375, you're more likely to finish that thickness in a single pass, conserving the nozzle and electrode and keeping your operating costs down. In addition, the lighter weight means you can move the cutter from a home garage to a